doing a lot of mom and pop restaurant artwork all around Atlanta, but I was doing artwork for the Hudspeth Report, Creative Loafing, things like that.
Okay, yeah.
But Mellow Mushroom was the perfect storm of what I do and what I was doing at that moment, which was trying to pursue music artwork in a time where album covers were dead and so were posters. So, I was coming in right at the right time.
So you were doing some like Grateful Dead and...
I did artwork for the Grateful Dead. I did artwork for the Allman Brothers. I did artwork for Stevie Ray Vaughan. I did artwork for Taj Mahal. I did artwork for the Red Hot Chili Peppers that was inducted into the Hard Rock Cafe permanent collection, stuff like that.
Okay, all right.
So we did a lot of stuff. It was primarily whatever was like the good old days, But I was doing artwork for all the local weekly publications here. I would pick out the worst ads that somebody obviously spent the most money on, and that would be where I would go to for it. It's a lot like the show business. You pick what's underserved and you serve it.
That's smart.
But then the artwork overlapped in every other part of my life. I mean, I started doing artwork with the G.I. Joe Collectors Club in the early 90s, and that was a completely separate style from everything I was doing in my professional career. But it all sort of led the same path, parallel at the same time everything started taking off. So it was a very interesting moment.
Now, was that something you already had a passion for while coming into it? It just happened to merge together?
Yeah, G.I. Joe was a lifelong passion because it was my first. I was a very poor kid, so we got, you get that one good present a year. The year it was G.I. Joe, we were done.
Yeah.
I mean, that was as good a toy as anybody got in '72, man. It was like, all right, I'm a member of the club. But it was all the commercials and all the comic book ads and all the mass market infusion that Hasbro did with the brand, because I can remember the comic book ads before I ever saw the television ads. And I can remember even hearing the radio ads in those early years for G.I. Joe at Christmas time. Kmart would have their G.I. Joe commercial, or the one commercials that drove people mad. And it was such a passionate time for intellectual property development. So many great intellectual properties were popping up. But I didn't know those terms back then. I was a kid who knew something was cool, and brother, that was cool. That was all there was. But it being a product of creatives, and my being an aspiring creative, of course, I was going to really be true to my school. And there were so many other collectors who were talented. And you realize that a hobby is more than a reflection of the artifacts in that hobby. It's a reflection of the energy of the talented people in any kind of hobby that are adding to it. And it became more of a how do we get enough people into the gang that we got all the talents we need to really make this thing fly on its own. And man, this was something that wanted to happen whether we did it or not. It wanted to happen, and I dig it. Anything like that, it was the same kind of feeling I had with Mellow Mushroom, the same kind of feeling, I've had with any of the other pursuits in my life, is that if it is pure and wanted, then it will succeed no matter who's doing it. It's supposed to happen.
Yes,
How did you get into Joe?
I was the 80s baby for sure. So
absolutely.
For me,
so media helped.
Yeah.
Media was everything.
And it was the comics, like you said. It was the show. I was trying to remember myself, like just from memory. Okay, which was first? Because you start thinking of Larry Hama and all the guys working
think
on
of that, but it was that Marvel comic hit the stand before anything else came in. And we didn't know what was coming.
Right. I just think Jim Shooter at that time, that editor-in-chief.
At Marvel,
he was big on the toy merchandise crossover kind of.
Yeah, Jim Shooter is a man of legend in so many ways. But it was a golden moment because you were seeing the synergy of mass merchandising and children's cartoons for the first time. You were of that generation, the Reagan kids, we call them. And when those play sets came out, who wouldn't be jealous of the USS Flag?
Exactly.
Who wouldn't be jealous of the Space Shuttle Complex, of the Terror Dome? I mean, they made the playset the star, where prior to that, the figure was the star.
It was just, and seeing it on the television, it was, like before as seen on TV, that's what it was.
It was, absolutely. As synergized on TV, as your mind is synergized on TV. But you had that moment where you had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you had G.I. Joe, you had Black Star, you had He-Man, Masters of the Universe. You had every kind of commercialized property that you wanted to, everything from Strawberry Shortcake on back.
Rainbow Bright.
And it was a dog-eat-dog moment. And those real survivors, those long-time eternal projects, those are all rooted in that moment, man. 1984, 85, 86, those years where they changed the entire toy industry.
And I've noticed, since our day, like Saturday morning cartoons was everything, and now they don't do it anymore. And I've heard the reasoning is supposedly that like it was too crooked to try and sell to little kids, or like they call it nag, like commercial nagware to get.
You kidding? No, they just learned to be more
America,
subtle with everything. I mean, it's the same thing today.
Right. Like, who doesn't want to make money? They're going to sit there and continue to do it if they can. So
But you know,
why that
the things that were collectible to us, I mean, your generation, G.I. Joe, was sort of being geared towards being a collectible at that point. When I was a kid, it was never geared. A true collectible is something you don't really expect.
Yes.
And so by nature of a collectible, if you prefabricated it to be a collectible, then
it usually doesn't work.
It's usually not the same thing. It just so happened that the following was so huge for G.I. Joe. And so intensely powerful and drawing in its, everybody wants to try. That's what it represented. It, more than the military, it represented a tribe that people wanted to belong to because it was fighting for the right thing. It's a message you can't go wrong with, and you can only hope that people aspire to that message.
We would always chuckle at the PSAs at the end, but in all actuality, some of that stuff stuck in my head.
Look, man, it really did help. The PSAs were, a device to tell you when the moment had come to appreciate the episode or whatever.
Yeah.
But really, honest to God, it became a form of like kabuki at the end. It became this almost signature of that moment, it ate up time in the thing, but you don't really think of it. You feel like you just got closer to that character. Yeah. What a great scam, man. What a great scam they pulled out.
We're okay with it.
Here's the thing, to get to know the people that made those things, the designers, the writers, the copy people, the marketing people, it's a fuller, rounder experience being a collector. When you had met these people and you saw what they were and what they did, and now you can see it in other places and other properties now, because they gave us a primer in that stuff. I look at things like Final Faction at Dollar Tree. That's a Dollar Tree brand, man. Yeah. But it has gained a following. They hoped it would gain a following, right? But they never counted on it gaining a following. It just so happened that it did. And so that sort of pops up from the same template that we're involved in multi-generationally. It's amazing.
It is pretty interesting. I'll see people now, I guess they have figures that are specialized for like Walgreens or CVS, like same thing. It's like,
absolutely.
So people
none of them have worked quite like Final Faction has in the last year. It's like, what a cliche name, what a cliche bunch of characters. But the fact that they went to the trouble to make a unified universe across these several figures and
that's huge,
and get them into people's hands for as cheap as they could. It's the same thing as G.I. Joe. They were literally trying to get something in everybody's house.
Right. Yeah. And that's the best, is because in our era, like you said, it's military, but some of the guys are just wearing like Hawaiian shirts, so they're just guys that you could play several things with these guys.
Absolutely. You weren't sure whether they really were in the military of any sort. They looked
Always
a little less.
undercover.
No, everything was undercover. But it played to that they had enough goofballs involved that everybody had somebody they could hang their hat on.
Right.
And with the 12-inch figures, we had to infuse them totally with their personality. You guys at least had some template to go down.
Although, as I looked around and I'm like, oh, that's why these were so cool, because you can customize anything. You can put them in a Bruce Lee outfit. You can put them in all
and it
sorts
can
of...
become a proxy for you. That's what I've loved about kids getting involved since I've been in it, is that their toys become the proxy for their adventure. They become their mini-me, and it really does seem to fill a niche. Even the ancient Egyptians were buried with their favorite toys.
It's funny. I was just thinking, like, really deep thoughts. Like, alchemists had the homunculus or something, the little version of themselves, like kind of thing.
A proxy.
Yep.
Absolutely. Everybody needs one. I wish I'd had one in my dating career, but there we go. You can't have everything. But to see the kind of turnout that we have here and see people flocking to it, it fulfilled a need of some kind that's greater than just a trivial pop culture thing.
For sure.
There's a deep connection, and if that connection is that truly real, then it must be important on a level even we don't know. I think it's really earned its place in our culture as a training ground for emotional maturity. Because how do you pull off being a grown adult if you're collecting toys? Well, they are a pop culture statement now. They are no longer just the things of a little kid. They really are a portrait of our culture. I dig it. And I hope, I hope you can find something cool here this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
What are you looking for? Anything good?
Oh, man. I mean, it's funny. I zero in on, like, little, like, for me, a white whale isn't even all that, like, the carrier, all that stuff's amazing, but for me it's like I wanted Soundwave from the Transformers, or I'll probably eventually get, like, either Tunnel Rat or Flint. It's very specific, like you said. It's the thing you kind of connected with.
Absolutely.
And then
you've customized your collecting to your life.
Yeah.
What really you did.
So how long have you been putting all of these shows together?
22 years. This is our 22nd year. Before that, I did work with Brian Savage and the National G.I. Joe Collectors Club, but I also did work with Hasbro on the collector's editions back in the early 2000s with the 40th anniversary stuff. And had the pleasure of really meeting all the cats that were behind the scenes and seeing how much of a real reflection of those people all this stuff was. Larry Hama is a phenomenal cat. He's one of the most interesting guys I know, because he's so interested in so many things. I think curiosity kind of is that defining element across all these cats, that they had a what if thing going on. It was amazing. I hope a lot of people get into this and get out of it what we've got now.
I was just going to say, it feels like, in our, and especially in the 80s, it was like, growing up, you'd hear these things, but you're a little too young to understand, like, why everyone's worried about these things, and then you could somehow go to the G.I. Joe stuff, and it technically is involving terrorists, it's involving all these darker things, but it's not.
But it all boils down to conveying the story of a tribe to a tribe, to a burgeoning tribe.
Yeah.
And it works. It's amazing that multi-generationally, I was in that first generation, so it's been considered 4 or 5 generations since my era in the toy industry. If you look at one, it's 7 years. And it's still amazing that people are getting into it, and people are still finding new things to get passionate about in the whole gig. So, where do you see it going from here?
My hope is, I'm of two minds. My hope is that younger people, it seems like, unfortunately these days, culture isn't, everything is adaptations, remakes, sequels, prequels. It has to previously exist.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they don't feel secure in putting it out there.
Right.
But when like, especially young people, I feel that when they're being kind of, I never knew when I was collecting G.I. Joe, like, I would hear from my dad, yeah, you know, there are older ones, they're big, you know, like this, and I'm like, well, what do you do with those? They're so big, you know, like because of the size, I thought I could fit more in the room and play around. But I think like with the kids, they need to feel like this is something of theirs, so like an entry point.
Absolutely, and you know, it's all storytelling. It's all storytelling, and where do you go with storytelling past a certain point? With this, it's the involvement of the audience, and it's the involvement of everybody creative that's creating their thing. What we're seeing are people branch off and telling their own stories with this as a background template. And I think anything that makes the world more creative is as valuable as anything as we can do. The only similarity the human animal has to the concept of God is supposedly he created. Well, we create, you know, and to create from being inspired is the greatest compliment any license or, you know, intellectual property could ever hope for. And I can't think of anything that has prompted as much creativity around it as these Hasbro properties. I mean, they were the result of a golden moment of creativity that may never happen again. But if we're lucky, they will. You know, that's what I dig about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.